Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live stream. The title is Indirect Forces That Influence Direction, and I would like to speak about the subconscious mind. I remember when I was younger, I bought this book that had the title Subconscious on it. You know, I forget the name of the full title of the book. I forget the author, but I remember the concept came to me at a point, even though I wasn't interested. Many things that a person learns, it's not the first time they see it. Sometimes the mind is exposed to data prior to, in some sense, making a decision. You see, the moment man shaped himself and divided himself from the natural world, that means the moment in the evolutionary scheme where there came a position, there came a situation where this force of nature suddenly noticed it was separate from the world. Suddenly the creature had legs and limbs and was running in a kind of in a world where before it was just an unconscious extension of the world. So we can say the animal is a conscious extension of nature. Now, as this consciousness occurred, there came the separation. There came this distinction. We separated ourselves from the earth and we became animals. And then we separated our attention from the earth and we became, in some sense, subjective oriented creatures. We became aware that of the I am. It took us, there was a point. Older people nowadays, they say don't be cocky, don't own too much, share, da 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 da. But there was a time where the concept of ownership did not exist. We had not evolved to that position. It was as majestic as the discovery of the future. The future wasn't, in some sense, people could see how life is changing, but to put it in a linear timeline where things are going forward and that it is the kind of the fuel, time is the fuel of change. Or you could even say the other way around, which could find more of an accuracy, where it says change is the fuel of time. So anyways, there was this separation. The separation suddenly, so an example would be, a playful example would be a creature opening its eyes and just being like, oh, just bewildered, moving forward. Then this creature eventually opened its eyes and it began naming the world. After we named ourselves, the world began filling up with names. And so language has a very important role in human consciousness. We take it for granted. But the most important field of education is language. Any person who studies language immediately becomes aware of the subjective reality's value. So what does that mean? Imagine somebody goes to a bank, okay? If you just looked at that person without seeing the sign of the bank outside or seeing anything that gives away it's a bank, you'd think it's a person in a room. But that person in the room is, in some sense, they have a sort of subjective significance of acknowledgement of why they're there. So we separated ourselves from matter and we became creatures. We separated ourselves. There was a separation from matter, then there was the creature, then there came a separation of, in some sense, thought. And so after human beings worship idols, they went on to worship ideas. And now we are still in that era. You won't believe it. Since the time of the Abrahamic religions, idea worship should have stopped, but it went the other way. There was a strangeness in the selfishness of the human being. It's as if every violent person on this planet feels something they don't acknowledge, feels the inefficiency that can echo. That inefficiency that echoes in civilization is the tragedy of the civilization. That means imagine somebody made a mistake back in the day. Now people are still making that mistake, and we're like, what happened to all this time? What is the implication of it? And then we discover the conscious mover, and the conscious mover is the prime idea that is in motion. So the subconscious mind was very fascinating, but I couldn't really place it until later on. I got introduced to Carl Jung. And Carl Jung has made one of the most important contributions. He has brought forth a conceptual way to acknowledge the mind. And it's not just him. I mean, many traditions have done, but the way Carl Jung did it was that he kind of conceived of the conscious, and then there was the unconscious, and then there was the personal unconscious, and in some sense, the collective unconscious. And the implication of the collective unconscious was the collective consciousness is hidden. So right now, there's some things that we cannot see even if we want to. If you're a good person, you can at most visualize the most chaotic version of yourself. If you're a chaotic version, at least you can imagine what the most good version of yourself would be, because these are in some sense it's an outline, it's a blueprint, it's a mat we put. It's like, this is the situation of the world. I summed it up yesterday when I was walking on the street. I said it's like the world has put on a mask, and most people are reacting to the mask, not seeing the actual world burning underneath this mask. And so this mask is how we, in some sense, administer and navigate our conceptual domains and realities. Because that is, in some sense, the start of war. For me, I looked at politics and I'm like, why is politics necessary? And I realize it's the same mentality of survival. Because we're creatures that understand that the world is a bit shaky, we have to wonder about our balance. Because we have to wonder about our balance, there is inevitably an urge of survival. So for me, this life, this natural world is too designed. There is so much design in it. It doesn't mean there's a designer up there looking at its creation as if we're like some sort of model set on a table of some, inconceivable being. For me, it is it is a development. It's a grand happening, and your relationship at the moment falls into two positions. Your relationship, so the way you are, in some sense, putting the world in place, or how you are opening your eyes to the world, and how, in some sense, the world opens your eyes. So when I say indirect forces that influence direction, I want to imply both of these, and how each one of them has a conscious and unconscious domain to it. You see, language functions through duality. What that means is it's never one thing. It has to have a spectrum. It's as if there was no space, there would be no acknowledgement of existence. If there was no existence, there would be no acknowledgement of space. Whether a tree falls in a forest and we're not there to hear it, and if it does fall or not, the value of civilization falls in its conscious ability. Pretty much how well human beings can acknowledge what they see, what is here. Observation is the key to most doors. Anything you observe for a while, you will suddenly see its workings, you will see its design. This is evolutionarily embedded into all beings. Our ancestors had to look around, see what sort of program is being run, and then choose to participate. And so I find that the human civilization doesn't have it's not just people are influenced by indirect forces. These indirect forces could be external and internal. Somebody could come and tell someone a sentence and it could destroy them. I've seen this in movies in some sense. There was this anime show called Tokyo Ghoul, where this one prisoner looks at the person who imprisoned him and says one sentence that the person gets so angry that he's like, die, 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 die. Like, the guy goes crazy. And the issue is that it's an indirect push. So right now, most people are just considering an objective life. If you tell them about their subjective life, they'd be like, it's too subjective to even think about a subjective life, man. And I'd be like, okay, that may be the case. The mind is an unknown place. But if we were to, in some sense, wonder, if we were to approach, then we would have to attempt. We would have to attempt to, in some sense, create a map to the unconscious, which in some sense was the light in Carl Jung's eyes. But this map in the unconscious is something where it's just there for anyone who suddenly becomes an explorer of life. If you notice, exploration is pure. When someone wants to know something, there's a purity to that. There's an honesty there. There's not even any desire, perversion, or anything. The person is just being real and wondering about reality. And there's no story that the observation and the attention has to, in some sense, fall into. I'll give you an example. See, imagine when I'm right now looking at this computer on the table, okay? I'm looking at this object. Imagine from my eyes this light beam. This light beam hits this object. Okay, imagine. This is playful, like imagine a thought experiment. From my attention, there is beaming something that hits this object. There's something that hits this object, and in some sense, to me, the originator of this light beam, imagine coming from my eyes, it reflects back into my subjective realm. Your attention is oscillating between the sensory perception. We are wavering between various ways that the intelligence kept. In one manner, we are particles in space. In another manner, we are a field of intelligence in which a particle has suddenly found attention in. So it's as if our mind belongs to belong to a collective dimension. Our bodies belong to a particular singular dimension. You see? And this is what I'm saying is not new. I mean, it's just pretty much the explorer's gaze as it falls upon a world it wonders about. Anything there is unknown, your knowledge evolves. Any person who thinks they know. This is why I feel professors feel guilty. All professors. There isn't an exception. They all feel guilty because their claim to their status in a changing world, to them at least, personally, whether they hide it or not, is perishable. So status in a changing world is a strange thing. That means even we see some people are trying to be in power. When you go look at politics and study the